Sitting alone in your room was nothing less than ordinary. Day by day you would watch the world go by through the large tall window panes, watch the sun rise and fall all from the stiff bed. The room was no stranger to you. It was a room you have come to call a necessary evil every time you've relapsed. There were days, maybe even weeks, that you would stay in this room, being attended to by the hospital staff on your progress. It had been going on for years, and it was a familiar feeling with every visit. But the one thing you enjoyed the most in the emptiness of the room was overlooking the open courtyard fitted with a net across the road, where you would watch people play volleyball, of all sports. There were times where you watched kids your age play around the courtyard, minding their own business. But one stood out to you the most. The first few days had been watching him almost analyzing the court, staring off at the net as if he were deducting its height compared to him. Eventually you spotted him practicing at the courtyard, spiking and serving the ball over the net. Watching him gave you some entertainment, but it also gave you some insight to mull over in the cold white room you stayed in. Soon you watched as he brought a friend along, an energetic, orange-haired boy, and it wasn't long until the ball they brought misdirected and headed straight for your window. That was 2 years ago. Ever since, the orange-haired boy whom you had learned his name to be Shoyo Hinata had been a ball of sunshine on visits. Still, your attention was brought on the taller boy, Tobio Kageyama. It was unspoken about that event, as he had sent the ball hurtling towards your window. You couldn't tell how, but by the look of it, he had some frustrations with Hinata that day. Every now and again, while you were admitted, they would swing by your window and wave. It started this way for a while until they began to hold conversations through the window. It was difficult at first due to the muffling of the glass pane, but it eventually turned into writing short notes on paper. You looked forward to some afternoons when they would walk the route past your window. The years passed by and soon you only met up with Kageyama, learning that this was his most frequented route home. There were times you would wave and only receive a nod from him, but this soon slowly turned into holding conversations with him alone, learning about his volleyball career in school and other things, such as his friends, teammates, and school life. Now a third year, you've watched how much he had grown and changed, even so watching a smile cross his lips upon seeing you. The question had been raised about yourself a few times before, why you were where you were, and to put it bluntly, you explained without bogging it down with any medical, technical details. The be-all end-all was that you had to be quarantined from others to sustain your health at times. You wouldn't stay for long periods, as Kageyama learnt when your room was empty upon some weeks of him walking past. Still, you would return again, and for solid weeks would always meet Kageyama. Kageyama? You spoke through the window, tapping on it as well to grab his attention. He snapped out of his thoughts for a moment, turning back to you, scrawling something on paper before pressing it on the window. How does it feel to be graduating soon? For a moment, he stopped to think before he scrawled on his notebook, pressing it against the window for you to see.
Exciting, but anxious too.
It was late in the afternoon, and Kageyama had approached your window without warning today, startling you in the room. Though you were happy to see him, it wasn't the typical day for a visit. You've learnt some days he would be too busy practicing his skills at Karasuno, finding his dedication to the sport he loved almost inspiring. However, your curiosity about his presence faded away after conversing about the end of the school year. Both of you continued this way, writing down your thoughts and pressing them to the window for conversation's sake. I get the nervous jitters, but you should be proud. You spoke. I'm curious to know where you would go after school.
You know, I haven't really thought about that for a while now.
Wow, the king hasn't thought about it? You replied. I thought you'd be more put together now that it's your final year. You watched as his brows furrowed, while he scrawled messily and angrily in his notebook, slamming it against the window pane and making you jump in surprise.
No, you dummy, I know what I want!
He yelled, causing you to chuckle. With the way his voice carried, he didn't need to show his notebook. You heard him loud and clear. He brought his notebook back to write a little further before slamming it back on the window pane.
And stop calling me king!
Sorry, you spoke with a playful grimace. I can't help it. It kinda suits you. Kageyama was slightly taken aback by the statement, returning his attention to his notebook with further notes.
I'm joining the V-League as soon as I graduate. That I know.
He answered. Sounds like you right off the bat, you commented. Then suddenly realizing your thoughts before you quickly pulled the notebook from the window, scrawling frantically and returning it to the window with a light thud. Sorry, wrong choice of words. You nervously chuckled. Anything else other than that? Kageyama shook his head in response, causing you to continue to scroll further in your notes. If you're confident in your choice, then all I can say is congratulations and good luck. There was silence from the other side of the window pane, while you slowly brought your notebook back onto your lap. Kageyama's eyes were cast away from you as if he were in thought. His fingers tightened on the journal in his lap before he began to write in it once more. You watched his intense gaze fixated on the notebook, as if he were trying to think of what words to say. He brought his notebook back up to the window pane, his eyes still looking away from yours.
Also, there's something I wanted to talk to you about.
He spoke, his voice muffled by the pain. Being late in the afternoon meant there was very little distraction or noise that would impede your hearing, and although still muffled, you could still hear his voice. There was very little traffic outside to distract you. What about? You asked, your notebook still pressed against the window. You watched as his brows furrowed, dropping the notebook in his lap and fixated his steely gaze on you.
How long until you're admitted out this time?
Maybe for another few days, you replied, pressing your notebook on the pane with your entire explanation written in full view. Just a few checkups until they re-release me. I should be alright for some time. So my fingers crossed for a few months. A small smile appeared on Kageyama's lips before it quickly disappeared. His gaze still fixated on you with a determination that you only recognized when he was readying himself for an important event. You half expected him to talk about his graduation, or maybe another upcoming volleyball meet. You couldn't keep up with that kind of scheduling on volleyball matches and the sort, but through the muffling glass pane, you heard,
Is there a chance I could see you afterwards?
A moment of silence rang through your room before you comprehended the words he said. For the past couple of years, learning about Kageyama, this was the first that he asked about actually meeting you outside of the hospital. You understood that his priorities were worth more than your mere visits, but slowly you took your pen to paper, jotting down your thoughts. I don't see why not, you replied, taking the notebook back and forth with your response. We'd have to practice some distancing, but it should be fine. I guess. I'd have to check. But you've never asked if we could meet physically. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
He replied softly. You couldn't catch it, but the way he moved when he responded told you otherwise.
Well, would it be alright? I don't know where the future will lead me, and I want to keep talking like this.
With a slight chuckle, you quickly wrote on your notebook and revealed, Messages through the window?
No, you dumb.
Kageyama stopped himself short, exhaling a breath before he looked back into your eyes once more.
I want to talk with you. For real.
The little fun that you had slowly dissipated away while you stared back into his steely gaze. He wasn't joking, but then again, Kageyama never really joked about things. Your breath hitched in your throat for a moment, looking away briefly out of embarrassment, oddly, and with uncertainty. While collecting your thoughts, you slowly jotted down on your notebook a question that earlier was burning you inside. Kageyama, why did you come here? You asked with the notebook scroll by the window, the realization dawning on you once again. It wasn't his typical day for a visit. Kageyama turned his gaze away from you with a slight pout upon his face, focusing on the thoughts in his mind on how to respond. After a while, watching his form almost still, as if he were frozen in a moment's time, he took his hand to paper, scrolling down his thoughts before bringing the message to the window. He sat there, silent, his face close to the window pane while both his hands pressed against the glass. I wanted to see you, you read, while he still sat across from you. Not a word spoke from his lips while you read his notes. And if I wasn't able to see you in person, I wanted to tell you the truth, at least. I really like you. Your voice trailed into a whisper as you read the last of his words, turning to him, close to the window. His nose practically touched the pane, leaning against it by his forehead. Still his eyes looked away from you, downcast towards the green grass below him. You sat on the cold tiled floors. Your heart skipped a beat upon reading the words he had to say. Following suit, you matched your hands onto his, feeling the cold surface of the window in both your palms before your head leaned into where he laid. You couldn't help but smile at the gesture. It felt cheesy, but in a way you never expected something so endearing as this from the man you've come to learn as the king. Thanks to Hinata. Thank you, Kageyama, you whispered, your eyes half lidded before you spotted Kageyama's gaze back on you. It wasn't filled with an intensity you've grown accustomed to, or with determination. It was almost a form of bashfulness, a side of him you rarely saw through his rough exterior. The both of you held this for a while, pulling your faces away to look into each other's eyes, but never parting the hands against the window pane. You gazed upon them, finding his hands were so much larger than yours. They could almost engulf your fingers if you were able to touch them. For the past 2 years, learning about his life, as much as he learnt about yours, Kageyama grew up to become a man in his own right. You could tell. For most of your life, sitting in this room made you an observant person to change everywhere, as if time did not matter in the scope of everything. Quickly, Kageyama pulled his hands away, scrolling Messalina's notebook for some time. You wondered what he was going to write next, finding that despite his frantic movements, he contemplated what he was writing. Your hands still laid against the glass for a while before you slowly retracted them away. You had no time to respond before Kageyama slammed his notebook against the window pane. He shifted his gaze away from yours once more, hiding away his embarrassment from your eyes. He did not say a word, not reciting the notes before you. Reading his messily written notes, you were taken aback by how much he wrote this time around. It stretched from one end to the other of the page, and besides any stories you've read of his, this was by far the longest and most thought out he had written. Shuffling on the cold tiles with the threaded blanket from your hospital bed, you approached closer to the notebook and began reading. I understand what you told me before about how you are, how people shouldn't be near you, or the fact that they treat you like you're fragile. But even though you're being treated for this thing, and that you also practice these precautions, I want to meet you. For real. And I want to let you know in person and show you that you're important. What you read next took you by surprise. When we do meet, I don't care if we have to be apart. Huh? A gasp escaped your lips upon reading his last words, but you never read them out loud. Instead, a flush rushed through the back of your neck, and you could feel the heat reach the tip of your ears. Was he serious?
I want to kiss you.
You turned towards Kageyama, his eyes still downcast and away from yours. Even though the evening light began to disappear, you could see a small blemish on his cheeks, a grimace pulling at his lips, and his brows furrowed into a glare, but not one filled with anger or haughtiness from when you first interacted with him this way. It was almost charming. You gripped on your notebook, nervous with anticipation, but also with the dreaded thought about how your condition would affect this first meeting. Tapping against the window pulled you away from digging yourself deeper into the rabbit hole, turning your attention back onto Kageyama, now with a smile on his face, and another message for you.
I meant what I wrote.
He spoke through the glass.
Let me know when you're admitted out, and I can meet you. Please.
The please was added by him, causing you to smile at how he edited himself every once in a while. You wrapped the blanket around you, feeling the cold of the tiles take hold of your legs before you nodded in agreement. You jotted down another note in your book, pressing it up to the glass for Kageyama to see. I don't think we could kiss then, but I can offer this. Kageyama watched as you brought your palm to your lips, kissing it before you pressed it against the glass. A flush of heat washed over Kageyama, and oddly enough he followed suit, raising his palm to his lips before pressing it against the glass where you pressed yours. Though flustered, a smile slowly appeared on his lips before you watched him laugh, which made you laugh with him. Both of you sat there for a while, hands pressed against each other until the night took hold. A sneeze from Kageyama signaled the end of the day before you watched him take his leave. He swung his large bag over his shoulders and waited until you were comfortable back in your bed. As you wrapped the blanket around you, you turned to Kageyama, who gestured with his hands again, pressing them to his lips and then to the window, his smile showering you with a warmth that caused you to tighten your fists against the blanket. You turned back to your book, writing one last note and holding it up for Kageyama to read. The smile on his face faltered out of surprise before it returned, turning his back to make his way back home. I'll be admitted out in 3 days. See you then.